Now, the US is claiming Russia's military is approaching Kyiv from several directions in a possible effort to encircle the city, but its forces have been stalled for several days, partly due to stiff resistance from Ukrainian troops. The Pentagon says Russian ground forces remain about 9.3 miles northwest of the center of Kyiv, virtually unchanged since Thursday, and are operating near an airport in the town of Hostomel, a region stricken by heavy fighting for more than a week.
What I would tell you, David, is that the Ukrainians continue to fight back very bravely and skillfully. And you've heard me use the word creatively, and I would say that that continues to be the case. They are making good use of their own knowledge, their own situational awareness, their skill sets, and certainly they're making good use of the material that they are getting, not just from the United States, but from many other nations as well. And if you just look at the map and you just look at how little progress the Russians have been able to make in the 2+ weeks now that they've been at this, yes, some of that is due to their own stumbles and missteps and logistical problems, but a lot of it is due to the Ukrainian resistance and how adaptive they are proving to be on the field and, frankly, in the street. It doesn't change, I think, our general understanding that they continue to be frustrated by a very stiff Ukrainian resistance, and they are not making the kind of progress on the ground that we believe they thought they would be making by this point.
Now, many military analysts, well, Western ones anyway, are suggesting that Russia's campaign to win Ukraine is not going to plan. Mike Nelson teaches military science at George Mason University. He's a visiting fellow at the National Security Institute, and he served with U.S. forces in Afghanistan. He joins us now from Arlington, Virginia. Good to talk with you, Mike. Do you think the Russians will be satisfied with how their military campaign is progressing?
Well, since we spoke last, they have made some slow but steady progress towards Kyiv. But what we've seen in the past about 48 hours is that northern offensive trying to encircle Kyiv has just stopped. And it looks like they may be kind of growing stagnant and developing an approach of using some of their artillery, some of their rockets, some of their missiles to try to attrit the people in Kyiv without having fully encircled it, which is problematic for both parties, honestly.
And from what you've seen lately, I mean, does it suggest that the Russians are intending to possibly bomb Kyiv as they've been bombing and shelling other Ukrainian cities? In other words, are they prepared to totally destroy the capital in order to take it?
It does seem that that is their approach to places like Kharkiv, and that we've seen earlier in the week, and what we're starting to see in Kyiv, that their plan is to encircle, cut off, basically besiege the city, and then use their indirect fires to try to break the will of the inhabitants. Like I said, they haven't fully encircled Kyiv, so that they may not be able to achieve the results that they had hoped to without doing that. But it does seem like the indiscriminate targeting is going to increase. At the same time, they're still fairly mobile down in the south. We see just before coming on with you, it appears that there's a Russian amphibious landing force getting ready to make an assault on Odessa. So they are still trying some mobile approaches in other places, but around Kyiv it seems that they've grown stagnant and are relying on their artillery.
I mean, you're something of an expert in military tactics. Does all this suggest to you that there's going to be a severe escalation in this war in Ukraine rather than a de-escalation? Because the stiffer the Ukrainian resistance, the more the Russians are likely to increase their level of attack.
Well, I think what we're seeing is at the tactical level, the Ukrainians are growing more and more adept. They're using their TB2 drones that they purchased from Turkey to great effect. Some of their armored personnel carriers, like the BTR-4s, are being able to conduct pretty audacious offensives against other armored personnel carriers, and even in some cases against T-72s we're seeing. They're using their anti-tank missiles, both the Western-provided ones and the ones they had organically, to great effect. And I think this is probably frustrating the Russians in that they are ineffective against not only the adaptive tactics, but just on their own. So Russia will have to adapt in some way, shape, or form. And I think what we're seeing is operationally and strategically, at least from Moscow, there's an unwillingness to try to de-escalate. So I do think that it portends that there will be some kind of escalation. I know that there's a lot of conjecture about weapons that have not yet been introduced, and I don't know whether Putin's thinking that or not. But it does seem like he's willing to ratchet up the civilian casualties because he's growing frustrated with conventional means.
And following those loud explosions that were heard overnight near Kyiv, on the outskirts, and into today, the capital now bracing itself for a ground assault, do you think? And if so, how prepared are they to defend the city, the Ukrainians?
Well, from the images we've seen, we know that they mobilized a fair amount of the population, as well as having some of the regular Ukrainian military that's had days or weeks to prepare for this. I think if the Russians try to enter the city, they're going to be fighting on Ukrainian advantage. They will have the structures, they'll have depth of the city to use. I think it would be really ugly for the Russians if they try to assault into the city. We have not yet seen, in most of Ukraine, some of the popular mobilization that we've seen advertised. The civil militias that have been building Molotov cocktails, etc. We've seen primarily most of the resistance that the Russians have been Ukrainian military. So I think this is going to, we've already seen estimates that range between 5,000 to upwards of 9,000 Russian killed. I think those estimates are fairly high, but either way, it seems that they try to push in and assault into Kyiv, that those numbers are going to increase while Putin has tried to restrain some of the information that's been getting back to Moscow or back to Russia. I think eventually the numbers of these casualties are going to start getting out and erode his population.